What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Thursday, February 27th, 2025. Glad to have you guys along. Thanks so much for tuning in as we are here with a big episode of the podcast to talk about the newest addition for Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks in the 2026 recruiting cycle. Maybe we'll sprinkle in some NFL Combine talk as well as that gets rolling out at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis this week. And joining me, as always, is Scoop Duck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, good to see you.
Yeah, great to be in. Great to be going, and glad we can get a second episode this week.
Yeah, we're trying to get back on it and do as many of these as we can. But we always prioritize making sure you guys have plenty of stuff to read from us over at scoopduck.com. So if you haven't already, go check us out there. You can try us out for 1 week for just $1. And we think we do a pretty good job over there of keeping you guys up to date on all the latest and greatest in Oregon football and recruiting. Speaking of recruiting, Dan Lanning and the Ducks, Justin, got some good news on Wednesday as 2026 Melbourne, Florida, Eau Gallie 4-star safety Xavier Lherisse announced his commitment to Oregon. And this was a decision that I think wasn't a surprise in that Lherisse committed to Oregon, but more so the timing of it, because I know you had an interview with him, an update with him over on Scoop Duck not too long ago where he named Oregon his leader and had scheduled his official visit. But here we go, Wednesday morning. We got Dan Lanning tweeting out the duck emoji, and the Ducks got a really, really coveted defensive back all the way from across the country in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Xavier Lherisse's offer list, it's really strong. I mean, he's got some really big offers there, some really big schools that are recruiting him. And like you said, it's funny because I just written a Next 5 to Commit article. And I'm not trying to take any credit, but I did go back and forth. I had Lherisse kind of like, I wrote out a list of guys and then I kind of went through and put the 5 in. And, what made put pause and why I didn't list him in that update is just because he hasn't visited Oregon in this 2025 calendar year yet. So, to me, it was like, okay, I mean, this guy just needs to get back out. He visited Oregon in the fall. But I mean, that's not too many visits in this day and age of recruiting. So it was just like, I didn't put him on there. But like you said, I just talked to him about a month ago, 3 weeks ago. He was very clear about where Oregon stood, very clear about, really liking the staff. And we know, you and I both know, the staff went out there. It was Coach Hampton and it was Coach Lanning. Like I think Coach Lupoy was the third coach. He got 3 coaches to go and visit him. And you and I know that in that January month, the Oregon coaches really, when they showed up like that, that meant that they, A, they covet that particular recruit, and B, they think they've got a really good shot with him. So, yeah, I wasn't a surprise, like you said, that he committed to Oregon. It's just when he committed to Oregon. I figured, we'd maybe see him in March or April or something like that. And then as that got closer, I probably would have felt more likely to promote that he was close to committing. But nice surprise, really good player, and been a little bit of discussion about his height or lack of height or whatever you will. That's a good football player. Turn on the film, watch him play. I'm not concerned in the slightest, and it's a great start. I think Oregon has a chance to really round out this defensive back room. I don't want to say easily. I don't mean it that way, but I think there's a pretty easy path for them to get a couple of the West Coast guys committed. Jet Washington or Brandon Arrington or Dalvin Benjamin, and really round out that room, and then maybe go grab a couple of these East Coast or national guys like Lherisse or some of the others they're recruiting.
And to your point about how much Oregon really coveted and prioritized Lherisse, I interviewed him after his commitment. You guys can read that with all the full quotes over on Scoop Duck for our subscribers. He talked about how when he got visited by the staff, they told him that they were only going to 2 schools. I would assume that the other school was probably Pace High School, which is home to 2026 offensive lineman Grant Wise, who just placed the Ducks in his top 5. Also have an update on him over on Scoop Duck, but he said that the staff was only visiting 2 schools. So with how far Oregon needs to travel to recruit nationally and get the caliber of guys that they want, time really is precious, and time is money here in the January recruiting period. So Really good job by Chris Hampton, who is, I believe he was named the 247 Sports Recruiter of the Year for the 2025 cycle. And he's just done a tremendous job here. So I think you definitely have to give him some props as the Ducks go into the Sunshine State to land Lherisse over the likes of Auburn, Notre Dame, Florida State, Penn State. Like, these are really quality schools and some schools that are pretty serious heavy hitters on the recruiting trail. Just to give folks a little bit of a rundown here on Lherisse, I know we've talked about his height and how that's been part of the discussion. For some reason, he's really not ranked very highly, even though he has all of these really impressive offers, Justin. Looking here on the On3 industry rankings, he's rated a 4-star, 88.76, the number 326 player nationally, number 27 safety, and the number 48 prospect in the state of Florida, right around that 5'10", 5'11 range, and 185, 190 pounds. But I think fans should be excited about Lherisse because this is a guy who's incredibly versatile, plays both sides of the ball. I interviewed his coach, Chris Sands, over on ScoopDuck, and got some awesome insight into the kind of guy the Ducks are getting. He's also the starting punter for Eau Gallie, which is crazy. And he said the only time this guy comes off the field is during field goals and extra points. So I'm not saying he's necessarily like Travis Hunter. That might be too grand of a comparison, but like, this is a dude who just doesn't want to come off the field, and you know that he's going to give you everything he's got.
Yeah, I mean, it's just if you look at his film, obviously we've got people watching on YouTube and we have people just listening via a podcast. For those on YouTube, you're seeing the highlights here, and he moves so well. I mean, really, he's basically playing more of a nickel in that defense, probably more so that he could be in the middle of the field and move around. At the high school level, you'll see coaches move their really good players kind of more to the central part of the field so that they can be more involved in the play. Because a lot of times you'll put a corner on one side of the ball and the ball will never get thrown to that side of the football or that of the field, excuse me. So just like the way you see him move, he's obviously a guy that'll stick his nose up there, but also is not lacking in coverage. And I recall something that, Marshall Malco was kind of talking about in the signing day thing is that, that a lot of times, safeties, if you will, tend to do one or the other really well. They tend to be a really good cover guy, or they tend to be, really good in support and reading and reacting at the line of scrimmage. But if you go and you look at Lherisse's film, he kind of does both, and his offensive highlights are pretty legit too. I don't think he'll play offense at Oregon, but I mean, they are not bad offensive highlights as well. So love seeing that. Looks like a really well-rounded player. To me, just kind of reminds me of Ifo Ekpre-Olomu, who played at Oregon, although he was a cornerback, was a guy that could move around too. And as I recall, I think Ifo was like around 5'9", 5'10", 185 pounds, and went on to play a little bit in the NFL. So, that's kind of just a off the cuff, comparison right now, but really like this. And again, you put this guy here, and let's say Oregon only needs one more safety. Let's say they only take one more safety. You got two elite guys out west to choose from, and if you can't get one of those guys, you can head out to Utah, where Moa is out there as well. You might not have to go, east of Texas now to finish out your safety room, which is really handy for this staff.
Yeah, you got a lot of really good options still on the board, and we'll kind of maybe wade into the waters of what's next at DB for Oregon here in a sec, Justin. But I think the commitment of Xavier Lherisse is interesting right now because of the excitement and also uncertainty about the Oregon secondary looking into the 2025 season, right? I think that at least at cornerback, I think some fans and some people, myself included, were a little bit critical because Oregon's DBs did seem like they were undersized at times. You can't have a bunch of, sub 6 foot guys lining up against Jeremiah Smith and expecting to have really good results. I just think that those aren't really in your favor. But for Lherisse, as a guy who maybe is viewed as a bit undersized, and that's obviously a talking point with the Oregon DBs lately, is what I'm getting at. I don't think this is necessarily a flyer or like a really risky take for the Oregon staff. And it's not like they looked at last season and said, oh, okay, we're just going to keep doing things the way that we did it and, keep bringing in some shorter DBs, if you want to call them that. Like, they wouldn't have taken this commitment if they didn't think that Xavier Lherisse had some serious skill. So, with him being from Florida and going against pretty top competition in that state, I think that you definitely feel confident that he'll be able to come to Oregon and ultimately get in the mix somewhere.
Yeah, there was no urgency for Oregon to take this commitment if they weren't prepared for it. So it wasn't like, hey, lock in your spot or tough shit. You know what I mean? That's not what it was like. And again, circle back, like we both have said already, Dan Lanning took time out of his precious January calendar to go and visit Lherisse on campus at his school. And like you said, he only visited a couple schools in the state of Florida, which makes a lot of sense because Oregon's really just not recruiting a ton of guys from the state of Florida this cycle. I mean, that tells you a lot you need to know about where this guy's at on the depth chart for Oregon, if you will, on the recruiting board. So I love it. And I love that, basically you go and you get this guy. Now there's a lot of opportunity for the staff to be selective on who else they recruit. And a lot of flexibility. I mean, both, Brandon Arrington and both, Jet Washington, two guys that I've mentioned already, those are taller safeties. So now instead of it just all being guys that are 5'10" or sub 6 foot or whatever, you have, a variety. And I think that's important when you're recruiting by position. You don't want all of the same body type in any position group. You need taller receivers and you need shorter receivers. You need taller DBs and you need shorter DBs. So again, I think it's just a great way to add variety. And if for those concerned about height or whatever, Oregon's got plenty of options that, are on the taller side or above 6 foot. So I'm not worried at all.
And one more thing I wanted to get to before we look at what's next at DB recruiting here, Justin, is just the Florida movement overall. I have always been someone that's super interested and intrigued by Florida talent. Oregon has recruited the state of Florida pretty consistently, but they've had mixed results, and it's not like the pipeline is super, super fruitful. But, you get one guy every cycle, every other cycle. But now the Ducks are looking at, I think it's going to be 3 players between the 2025 and 2026 classes. You look at Zaire Addison, the offensive lineman out of Tampa, Carrollwood Day, linebacker Gavin Nix out of IMG Academy in Bradenton, and then now you have Xavier Lherisse joining the mix here. It would have been 4 if Dallas Wilson hadn't flipped to Florida after the national early signing period. But that's what ultimately ended up
Florida's
happening.
just renting him for a year anyways. They're going to end up firing Napier, and then Wilson will be like, oh, crap, I should have gone to Oregon, a la Dante Moore. Bold prediction, right?
We'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely going to be one that we can monitor as Wilson gets ready for his true freshman year with the Gators. But yeah, I think just looking at the Florida efforts that Oregon's making, Grant Wise is definitely the next most notable name to watch there that I think Oregon actually has some tangible traction with. You always see guys that are from Florida and they're like, oh yeah, Oregon's cool. Like, I want to go take a visit, but like, are you just going to have fun? Like, how real is that interest, and how real is Oregon's chance? So I think Xavier Lherisse shows that Oregon is a real contender in Florida. You can't get everybody. It's just too talented of a state, too many big schools going after guys there. But I think this is certainly a step in the right direction and a good development for Dan Lanning and company.
Well, and I think there's 2 things at play this year for the 26 class. And one is being that although the Sunshine State, Florida, is always full of talent each and every year, it's a state you must recruit. It's kind of a down year for the state of Florida in terms of the number of talent. It's just not as abundant as we've seen in past cycles. Could be, and it could just be a 1-year glitch. But conversely, and in addition to that, you look at the state of California, and it's a banner year for the state of California. So I think if you're Oregon, you're just kind of trying to be really smart and efficient with your resources and saying, look, okay, not a lot of need for us to go and work 3,000 miles away from home, when we have all that talent right below us in Southern California, where we recruit incredibly well under Dan Lanning. I just think you see those 2 things in play, and I'm all for it. That's just smart recruiting. Don't go and commit yourself to the state of Florida just so you can be in the state of Florida. If there's talent there and it's genuinely interested, go get it. If there's talent in the state of California and it's genuinely interested, don't overlook it. And that's, been one of my biggest criticisms of Lincoln Riley to date. But he's obviously doing a much better job of that this recruiting cycle, and we'll see how it plays out there.
And that goes back to Marshall Malco's other point from the signing period. He thought you could recruit solely West Coast talent in the 2026 cycle, and that would be more or less enough to go ahead and win a national championship, or at the very least put yourself in a position to do that. And it's no secret that the 2026 talent out West is better than the 2025 talent. Not to say the 2025 class was bad. I just don't think it was a particularly good class. You had some great players there without a doubt. So I love the point there. And now we can kind of shift into a bit of what's next before we get to some combine talk, Justin. And Oregon's in a good spot with a number of DBs here. And that is kind of really that and receiver are the two positions that we just haven't seen Oregon really kind of get things going just yet in the 26 class. And that's not for a lack of effort. I think it's just because they want to be selective. And then you also have to account now for the shakeup at wide receiver coach with Ross Douglas coming over from Syracuse following Junior Adams' departure for the Cowboys. So at DB, you talked about Brandon Arrington. He's a local guy, kind of close to me out in San Diego area at Mount Miguel. He's one of the top athletes in the country, blazing track speed. You also have Devon Benjamin, a coveted cornerback prospect out of Westlake Village, California, Oaks Christian High School, a school that Oregon is very familiar with from the days of Kayvon Thibodeau. And then you also have a guy like Hayden Lowe that was there and recruited by the Ducks in the 2025 class. So I think those are some of the premier names out west. Jet Washington from Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman. He's another one at safety. You also have Jaira Edwards from Baltimore St. Francis Academy. He's a big-time safety that Oregon's been linked to for a long, long time. But I think that those are certainly some of the big names that you kind of have to keep an eye on here if you're looking at someone who is potentially next in line to commit to Oregon. And I think really I would probably circle Devon Benjamin at the top of that list because, yes, he's a SoCal guy, but I know that he's had some serious interest in the Ducks for the longest time. And I think that Oregon finds themselves battling USC, and with USC kind of doing their thing and getting some good recruiting momentum lately, especially after the Jonas Williams flip, that Devon Benjamin recruitment is really, really a crucial recruitment for landing in the state this cycle.
Yeah, it's just, something that kind of coming at a signing day, for me, you start looking at, let's just take a lesson here and look at Ohio State and their championship run, right? For Ohio State, they had some really good talent that they brought in through the recruiting pipeline and developed over the 2, 3, 4 years. And then in that championship year, they supplemented a few spots with some really good transfer players. Obviously, Caleb Downs being one of them. Went in and got Will Howard at quarterback to lead them offensively, but they didn't live in the transfer portal. And I think that's that's kind of the chemistry or the makeup, if you will, to kind of build those teams. Michigan did a very similar thing the year before when they won. So I think that's kind of the blueprint. And what I'm getting at is I think Oregon's laid the foundation in the defensive back room between 2024 and 2025 recruiting at that position, right? I think you've got enough young, talented bodies in there now. And yes, we did see Oregon dip back into the portal again for defensive backs this cycle. But I think if this 26 class can be as good as we think it can, you've now got 3 classes with some really good players that will allow you to be very selective and very limited at defensive back recruiting moving forward. So, obviously they've built almost an entire secondary through the transfer portal the last 2 years. And I think we're going to see Oregon get away from that. Doesn't mean it goes away completely in 1 year, but it'll kind of go away. And this 26 class is going to be really like the cherry on top or the final kind of key to that. And so, those are the things that I'm looking at. A lot of times we get caught up in recruiting in that particular cycle. Like, okay, you've got, and this used to be the way, right? You've got 2 receivers graduating. You need to go get 2 receivers in this cycle. And really with the transfer portal and just the way college football is now, you're really working 2 years out. You're really trying to project, hey, which guy are we going to be able to keep? Which guy is going to be good enough to see the field? Who isn't? Where are we weak? You're really projecting 2 years out. So for me, I think I see this 26 class, and you rattled off some good names. Salisi Moa is another one that I would throw in there from Utah. Listed as an athlete, probably going to play safety in college. I think Oregon might lead there. Again, circling back what I said a few minutes ago, I think Oregon can finish out the safety class with guys simply west of Texas, whether it's Moa, whether it's Brandon Arrington, whether, Jet Washington. You can get any, 1 or 2 of those 3 guys, and you're going to be in really good shape to pair it with Xavier Lherisse. So, and cornerback, I don't know that they need more than 2 cornerbacks. So if you can go and get Dalvin Benjamin committed, a guy that I think Oregon leads for, you kind of only need one more guy. So you don't need this huge board with a list of 20 names on it. You probably just need 4 or 5 solid names that you feel like you can recruit. And, again, maybe it's a West Coast guy, maybe it's somebody outside the footprint. But like we've been saying already, and Marshall Malco said, it's really nice for you to be able to spend a lot of your resources, a lot of your time recruiting that talent in the Western footprint. It saves them a lot of travel. It saves them a lot of time and travel and a lot of resources to be able to do that. And it makes life a lot easier getting those guys on campus as well.
Yeah, distance certainly helps when it's on your side, and it usually isn't. I mean, not traditionally, I think, with the way that Oregon has expanded its reach over the past couple of years. So if you're watching us on YouTube, we had some Devon Benjamin highlights before, and then now we got Brandon Arrington on the screen now. So even though some of Oregon's top targets at one point in the cycle have already committed elsewhere, 2 guys, RJ Sermons and Brandon Lockhart from SoCal, they're already committed to USC. And I think it's looking increasingly likely that both of those guys end up sticking with the Trojans, particularly Sermons, because his older brother is already at USC and kind of got, a little bit of a last minute offer right before that recruitment ended up coming to a close. But Lockhart seems like he's really kind of re-solidified his commitment. We both, I think, had predictions in for Oregon to flip him at one point or another, but seems like the Ducks have cooled a little bit there, but not necessarily for a lack of effort. So the DB board's still loaded. And like you mentioned, I'm glad you talked about the numbers a little bit there, Justin. Oregon does have the luxury of being selective with how they recruit the portal, and then how they've also stacked some really good classes in the past here, specifically at defensive back. So now that we've talked a lot about recruiting and Xavier Lherisse and where things are at with 26, how about we talk about some NFL Combine? Because Oregon's sending a program record 12 guys to Indianapolis. They've already started talking to the media, and we got some good snippets. We'll get some more stories up on ScoopDuck. But now we get to see these guys go out and compete and show their freaky traits. So I know you wrote a little bit about the Combine earlier this morning. What are you kind of thinking as the Ducks head to Indianapolis?
Well, yeah, I mean, here's the deal. I know that it's Washington fans or USC fans or whoever that want to, mock Oregon for not developing players, whatever. You put 12 guys in the NFL, it doesn't matter where they came from, right? It doesn't matter if they were transfers. It doesn't matter if they were recruits. They showed up at your program, and whoever they were, whichever way they got there, they got better. They got developed. And I think you could say that, about Jordan Birch specifically. I think you could see that Derek Harmon rose his stock at Oregon. Jabbar Muhammad, I don't know if he raised his stock or not, but he didn't hurt his stock. I know that for sure. So, I think this is step one for not only those transfer guys, but the prep guys that came through Oregon, Terrence Ferguson, and some of the others, to go out there and you showcase your talent. And what you do is you get teams really interested in you as a prospect. And, why I say that is because you're going to come back to Oregon and you're going to have a pro day. And that's, kind of like your second audition for those teams to either validate what they maybe saw at the Combine, because they're going to see you at the Combine, and then they're going to go back and they're going to watch film on you. They're going to, they're going to have guys watching film and saying, hey, yeah, this validates what you saw in Indianapolis, or, maybe we need to see a little bit more at their pro day. So this is kind of the debut and sets the table for a lot of these guys to, basically raise their stock in the next 2 months as the NFL draft gets going at the end of April. So, really exciting time. I wrote an article with the 5 guys I think have the best chance to boost their stock at the NFL Combine. That's over on ScoopDuck. It doesn't mean I'm right or wrong, but I did give some reasons why I listed those guys. I think Tez Johnson is one. And again, we were just talking about height and size. I mean, he's obviously a smaller receiver, doesn't weigh a lot, not super tall, but like, he produces. Like, I don't care. He went to Mobile in the Senior Bowl and just produced and was a beast back there. I think somebody's going to look at him at this Combine and be like, okay, yeah, he is smaller. So what? There's smaller receivers in the NFL. I mean, Tyreek Hill isn't a big guy. He's pretty darn good last I checked. So
Tank Dell.
Tank Dell, yeah. Some of those guys are slender. I mean, the production doesn't lie. So I think, Tez Johnson's one of the guys that I listed had a really good chance to raise his NFL draft stock. And there's 4 other guys if you want to go read that article. But again, this really sets the floor for those guys for the next 2 months to, hopefully elevate their stock.
Tez is certainly a guy that can raise his stock with like a good 40 and some other agility numbers. And yeah, he carved it up in Mobile. So he's already heading into this combine with a ton of hype and a ton of buzz. So now it's time for him to match that. And then a lot of these top quarterbacks aren't throwing at the combine. So that could present an opportunity for Dylan Gabriel, who's supposed to go and participate in everything based on what I've been able to see. So I think that'll be a fun one to watch. And a lot of these guys that are coming to the combine, or going to the combine, I should say, were some of Oregon's 2021 recruits. So like that, for me, that was the first batch of recruits that I actually got to see in person in Eugene when I moved out there. So I'm really excited for that. I mean, I remember I interviewed Jeff Boston when he committed to Oregon as a safety, which feels like forever ago. So I don't know if I'd say I feel like I'm getting old necessarily, but it's always fun as a recruiting guy to see people that you covered kind of go chase their dreams and ultimately have their name called during that NFL draft. So the Ducks are sending a ton of guys to the combine, and that's really right where you want to be, because it's going to keep linking Oregon to the NFL, and that is increasingly becoming the biggest appeal for a lot of top recruits. It's not competing for a national championship. It's who's going to get me to the NFL. Maybe you could say that's selfish. I don't know if I would say that, but I think that's an interesting point of clarity here, because a lot of people, I think, kind of latch onto that national championship contender, which is a good thing to have. But at the end of the day, it's kind of, what can this school do for me? And Oregon's going to get you to the league. It's looking more and more.
Yeah, I think, it's important in both, but I think when you look at transfer portal recruiting, which is now critical to any winning team, they're all doing it. I mean, Michigan's doing it, Ohio State's doing it, Alabama's doing it. They're all using the transfer portal. Hell, even Dabo's using the transfer portal now. And I think obviously NIL is the thing. We know NIL is there, and you're going to have a competitive offer for anybody that you want, transfer portal or high school prep recruiting. Like, you got to have NIL. But if you exclude that, what's next? Okay, especially for transfer portal guys, they want to go somewhere that's winning / competing for a national championship. And the second thing is they want to get developed, and they want to get to the NFL and be a high draft pick. So again, you start looking at these guys, and if you're Dan Lanning, you can say, hey, I sent 12 guys to the NFL Combine, and they got drafted this year. A transfer portal guy is rarely going to go and look like, okay, but who was a transfer portal guy and who was a prep guy? You're just going to throw the number out there and be like, oh, okay, that's pretty good, because I want to have a chance to do that. I want to get to the NFL, and they might be a mid-round guy or a late-round guy at that point. But if you can say, hey, come out here, we're going to win a lot of games, and we're going to develop you along the way and get you into those early rounds, that's what they want to hear. And if you could prove that you've done that, they're going to believe it. So I think these are, this is a very critical component for Dan Lanning in the sustainability, not just his ability to recruit the transfer portal this year or next year. For him being able to do it on a continuous basis is being able to show, hey, we're putting guys in the league. It doesn't matter if they're prep recruits. It doesn't matter if they're transfer portal guys. We're putting guys in the league. Nobody's going to care what Washington fans think. Nobody cares what USC fans think and what, transfer portal you. Doesn't matter. Oregon's winning and putting guys in the NFL. That's all that matters.
Couldn't agree more. And I think it's going to be fun to see how many guys actually get drafted, because I think the Ducks set a record last year with 8 guys in the draft, 8 or 9. And they are certainly in favor to break, like they could break that record potentially this year. So with the way that they've been recruiting high school and transfer portal, that number is only going to continue to go up, and that's got to be a great development if you're a Duck fan. But that's pretty much all I had, Justin. Anything else you want to throw in here before we get out of here?
No, I probably should have done better research, but I know there's some key basketball games coming up for the men's team and women's team. I believe they play later today. The women do. So be sure to check that out. We'll get the games at least posted up on the site so you can follow them. But it's here it is, the last week and a half in conference play before we begin Big Ten Conference Championship basketball. So be sure to tune into that as well.
There you go. Well, if you want to find more of Justin, you guys can follow him on, should I just say X at this point? I mean, I don't know. We're pretty deep into it. You can follow Justin on X exclusively at JHopkinsSD. You can find me anywhere at Torres Sports. Come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. And if you're watching us here on YouTube, subscribe to the ScoopDuck On 3 YouTube channel. Share the show. We appreciate you guys so much. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Duck Dish Podcast.